Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. The current challenges facing the country has indeed affected all the sectors of the economy. But what is the case when it comes to the banking sector? Or how will the current challenge impact on the future of banking when it comes to lending, credit extension, and financing those critical projects in the country? If you are also a businessman, what should be the strategy going forward, looking at the current challenges facing the economy? Well, all these things you're trying to get some answers on PM Express Business Edition. He's a former MD of a bank, a president of the Banking Association, and also, for those who didn't know, he is an economist. And now he's into strategy. Well, when it comes to our tradition, he's the chief of Pishegu. I hope I got the name right. Mr. Alhassan Andani is my guest on PM Express Business Edition. Andani, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I hope I got the accolades right, especially the one about the chief of
former CEO, former president of the Association of Bankers, now chief of Pishugu.
And also more into strategy.
Yes,
now
more into strategy, enterprise development.
LVS
LVS,
Africa.
yeah.
And what I mean, for somebody who was into banking, people say that, well, this is more of a far departure. But for those who didn't know your background, it's not a surprise at all.
No, actually, LVS Africa is an enterprise development firm. And you know, banking is all wrapped around enterprises. And what we try to do is to see how we can help, particularly Ghanaian African entrepreneurs, to build enduring companies. You know, because if you look at the average life cycle of most African enterprises, they don't live beyond the founder. So LVS Africa, works with entrepreneurs, firms, to see how we can help them bed down all the disciplines of governance, financial management, marketing, people management, to make sure that they can live long beyond their founders.
Before I get deep into banking, I really first want you to put on the economist hat as an economist and for what is happening to the economy, the challenge and all the rest. When I read the IMF's initial article for consultation report, they said that they are seeing signs of recovery. AGI Association Chief Executive recently said that, well, he thinks that things are stabilizing. The governor of the Bank of Ghana, or the Bank of Ghana, talked about the fact that, yes, the economy is recovering. Mr. Alhassan Andani, you've been in the banking space for a long time. You're not a private person. You're working with a lot of businesses. What is your verdict on what is happening right now in terms of whether we are recovering, we're seeing signs of recovery, or it is stabilizing?
I don't have the benefits of the data, but from where we are, we need a huge dose of confidence. But before we start to talk of recovering and stabilizing, we've just got to step back and to say that we are in a global economy, we're in a sub-regional economy, and none of that is stabilizing. It's getting much more distorted, and therefore we need to step back and understand the bigger, geopolitical financial structures that are evolving, which would have no doubt impact us domestically. However, we also do have what I call low-hanging fruits, which is what do we do? And especially knowing that the construct of the financial system we had before this current crisis, which, whether it's COVID that has changed the entire, people have really looked at their own domestic supply situation. They've really looked at own domestic production and the global kind of financial and economic structure that existed, which was severely shaken by COVID. That will change the way goods and services are produced and distributed around the world. That will change the way financing is done. That will change capital movements. So all those significant movements we need to appreciate and then see how that flows back, and even how we can structure ourselves to flow towards it. Otherwise, we cannot just be sitting down and think that it's going to be business as usual. Things are just going to settle, another IMF program, and then you go back to capital markets or you go back to bilateral flows. Things will not work like that.
Then some will say that it is critical that maybe we appreciate where we are. And for some people, they've argued that the economy is about the businesses and what businesses say.
Yeah.
And not what the Ghana Fiscal Service is telling us, not what the various big actors are saying.
Yeah, yeah.
If you go through the Ghana Fiscal Service data, industry is still struggling.
Yeah.
Other sectors are still struggling.
Yeah.
But you see that signs of recovery. What is business confidence like? And that's why for me it is critical to gauge the pulse of persons like you in terms of what are you seeing? Are you seeing that yes, there's some signs of recovery that the IMF is saying, or listen, no, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. We are nowhere near getting to that stage of being complicit that the worst is over.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have had some stability in the local currency exchange rate, and that stability is born out of us not really servicing our foreign debts. If we were servicing our foreign debts and that outflow had to go, there'll be distortions in that area. I believe most importers have also scaled back on imports, and therefore, demand for foreign currency. So if you were to measure stability by the stability in the exchange rate, that is still not, with interest rates still sitting north of 30%, that's certainly not stability. Yeah, and power cost, taxes, if you look at the aggregate of taxes to manufacturing or firms, it's just pretty too high. If you look at, again, financial flows, if you look at whether banks particularly are now smarting under, very heavy, liquidity pressure, because they had to accommodate this non-servicing of government debts and all of that, and also taking some losses. So they need to preserve liquidity. So banks are not going to be in a hurry to provide capital. Again, private flows, because of all the personal, pension homes, pension houses, individuals with cash. Everybody is kind of preserving and conserving and waiting to see. I cannot see how you talk stability with its, background. So it's just because of self-preservation. That's why there's a semblance of quiet on the market. But I don't think any company facing interest rates north of 30%. Taxes, if you put the aggregate taxes together, it's frightening. The exchange rate is still, even at 11.2, 11.4, it's quite high, to pass it on to domestic plus interest rate. I think people are just hibernating and keeping essential services running.
And so some would argue that maybe, George, this is more of a human-induced artificial stability that we are seeing, and not the real actors of the economy recovering that we are supposed to
see. As I say, rather than say human-induced, I would say self-preservation by firms and investors, and of course, and look, there is a pent-up demand for people who are owed this money by government, are waiting to be paid. And again, if we just look forward and say, when we start to get into the years of repayment of these debts, you're wondering, where is that current hibernation of future income? Where is that happening? Because to be able to service debts from 2025 going, as we have thrown the ball into the future, you have to have something happening now that will result in incremental cash flow, either from government activity or private investing for taxes. You just don't see that now. So we have to be hard in terms of examining the fortunes now and into the future, because is it the quiet before the storm?
Interesting.
So we have to be careful.
We crave for an IMF program, and now we have it. I mean, there are some, depending on where you stand, if you try to draw the comparison between Ghana and Zambia and how that economy quickly rallied. Some are saying that the problems that are facing these two countries were different. We've had a IMF program right now. Do you think that it is helping stabilize things for us, or it has kept long in us realizing the full benefit? The IMF mission is in town doing the first review. There are strong indications that we will pass this first review. That would again help in the confidence building and investor confidence in the economy as well. From your side as well, again, as a business person, as an analyst, somebody, you are engaging a lot of businesses. You've been in the thick of affairs, you're outside there. Is this fund program getting us the results that we were all looking up to, or again, the hibernation is still in steam?
Look here, I mean, in terms of stability within the fiscal regime. Yes, it's given, because if we didn't have a program right now,
it could have been worse.
It should have been, yeah. We just, because, you know, you're running systems, government has bills to pay, and we just didn't have the income to pay those bills. That gap is what this is. So within the government system, quieting down, taking a breather, yes. But after you've taken the breather, what next? Who's going to respond for you to get that more taxes? You know, so those institutional reforms, that discipline to actually execute policy, how are people going to take it? So, yeah, the problem is deeper. It's a lot more institutional reform, a lot more confidence. And are we going to stabilize with IMF and go back to the debt capital market? If we don't, who is going to, what kind of attraction do we have now for foreign direct investments to come and kickstart? And it's in the area of foreign direct investments that you are now looking at all the distortions created by the global disruptions, from geopolitics, from war, from COVID, from every institution. I mean, Europe is now trying to self-preserve. The Americas will be trying to self-preserve. You can see the Gulf countries are doing things. China, all of them are trying to. So that kind of massive direct investments that we probably are expecting, we have to moderate it and probably start to craft investment programs that are large enough, impactful enough, that can stand on its own in terms of global exchange. But yeah, I'm not sure where after the IMF we expect those funds to suddenly flow in. Because even domestic revenue generation and taxes will be challenged.
Are we seeing our business community and your investor partners, are they that optimistic that with this fund program that we are doing, if we pass this first review, are we going to see that respond, or are we going to see them respond in terms of coming in?
Look, I'm not sure people are in a hurry. We're in a because we have an IMF program, which is just first review. We have elections coming up next year, and all the toss-up of things that will happen between now and January 2025. Let's be honest. Nobody's going to be rushing in droves. We got to understand. Of course, mining is doing extremely well. Gold is doing extremely well. So even without invitation, they are already here.
Lithium and all the rest.
Lithium is coming up. Lithium is a global, big demand now because of electric cars and all of that. So those things that will naturally, as I said, on its own, in terms of global competition, can stand with minimal governmental interference and moderated taxes. Yes, will compete. But I'm not sure. Even with this program, elections coming up in 2024, all the toss-up, all the reorganization that will happen if any kind of government takes over from January 2025. People are just sitting now, as we said, rushing in with cash in the next 2 years.
Do you think that elections will be our biggest challenge? Because in the past, and again, you've been in the banking industry, where when it's getting to elections, people hold on to FDIs, big projects are being held on, the wait and see, the economic policies. Some have argued that our biggest challenge in this perception that, or argument that science of recovery, our biggest hurdle here is the elections, because people will be scaling back to watch and see. What is the economic program? Will the new government pursue this DDP? What will be the outturn going forward in the next 2 or 3 years? And that will be the biggest challenge for us than any signs of recovery or IMF program.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even under normal circumstances, even in normal years, when the economy is doing well by our standards, and we're running up to elections, we often will see even our own domestic firms slowing down, not even to mention foreign partners. That's even under normal circumstances. The circumstance in which Ghana is not normal. We're having the first government default in debt. We're having a global scenario that is very unpredictable, very volatile. So that kind of, aggregate confidence we are talking about to get us going is not there at the moment.
Are we living
Yeah.
like an economy that is in crisis, like an economy that is recovering, or there are some who are saying that it is still business as usual? If Mr. Mensah, who used to be a billionaire, has now been declared bankrupt, maybe he might move from a first class to a premium economy. There are some who are saying that the challenge in getting back the confidence and the support in terms of taxes, I don't mind paying, because we are not seeing the other side living like an economy that is going through challenges.
I think that's always been the call to action by, whether it's businesses, civil society to government, that let us see that significant reduction in the cost of governance. Let's see the, what are we doing now that we can suspend and leave for good times, and put a number to it. What is it that we want to accept which is really not required under our circumstances? Even our own current expenditure, I don't think we have actually to date seen that large number which we can say that the fiscal or government expenditure has dropped by that. So literally, it's as if it's business as usual. Have we stopped traveling business and first class for governmental work? Have we stopped driving those big land cruisers and their fruit? Have we stopped all the conferences? Have we those things that we should just stop and get to work and think? Have we stopped all of that? The number of, So, I think under the circumstance between now and your election in 2025, we need to see that governmental sector, pulling itself in and demonstrating to everybody that we mean business.
Mr. Nandi, do you buy the argument about the rigidities in the budgetary and all the arguments about that because of those things is still making it difficult, that there is little room to cut?
Yes, look, rigidities, government is the largest employer, and you just don't, because to cut government employees, that also brings its own social upheaval. Is that the area? No. But there are certain rigidities. You're maintaining the civil service, you are maintaining the security services. Yeah, those things you cannot be inflexible, or you cannot say, let's just cut. You can't. But there are a lot of things that we are doing, projects, fiscal projects that we are doing, which we can suspend.
Yeah.
Nothing has happened. Nothing will happen. I don't normally like getting into politics, but there are certain programs and projects that can be stopped, curtailed, that we don't have to do it. There's not a life and death. There are a whole lot of life and death issues that we can't stop, but there's a whole pile that are not life and death. Stop it. It's just like any one of us in our own households. When times are good, you have everything. When times are tough, there's just that 1/3 of activities that are, life and death, and that's you conserve that and let everything else.
Are we getting into proper banking? NPLs are going up. What it means for lending, credits, and business strategy, and all the rest. This is PM Express Business Edition to look at the current challenges that the economy is going through and how that would change banking, the future of banking when it comes to lending, when it comes to borrowing, when it comes to credit extension, and also as a business person or enterprise. What should be the strategy going forward? Is it going to be business as usual, or you also have to change the way you do business? This is PM Express Business Edition. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the economy and how that is going to affect banking, lending, credit, investment, and also supporting businesses in this country. The former chief executive of a bank, he's the president of the Ghana Bank Association. He's an economist and also a strategist helping businesses how to model their way out. Mr. Larson and Danny, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Non-performing loans, it hit a record high. Yes, we will blame COVID. Yes, we blame the economy. But there are some people out there who still want to put the blame on the banks about the prudence, what they go through, giving out these credits and not be moved by relationship banking or the fact that this is our client and all the rest. some are saying that still the backstops of the banks to do some prudent work before lending.
Yeah. No, look, I agree completely with that. Creating risk assets on any bank's book is clearly the decision of the bank. Our credit policies, our sector selection policies, risk acceptance policies, they're all internally driven policies and actions. So you cannot really, even including the levels at which you invest in government paper or, for that matter, financial instruments on the market, except for certain statutory, requirements that says, every bank should put X amount in government paper or in treasury because of regulatory compliance. Otherwise, the creation of risk assets is entirely the discretion of banks, and therefore, you can say that MPLs, yes, the banks have responsibility, but remember that a loan of any kind is a promise. It's a promise. It's a promise predicated on a whole lot of things happening. Some endogenous, that is, those can happen within the bank and within the firm that you are lending money to, and also exogenous, significant matters that can happen outside of your control. What we try to do in credit is to try and gauge as much as possible the matters that are under our control and how we can hold it together, and estimate to the best with your risk lens on the exogenous things that can militate against or work against your credit, and try to get a balance. That's when you create that kind of asset, and every economy needs that. Because if you all freeze, nothing will happen. So you got to take risk. So we take it within a measured risk envelope. Now, when you have a government, we all go to school and we are told that governments never default. I mean, first lesson in your risk less is government paper. So immediately your government, which is a significant part of your GDP, fails to pay. Just look at the snowball effect on it. Companies that are owed money, who were lent money by banks and financial institutions, believing that they were rendering services and goods to a government or an entity that would never default. Suddenly, they are told that they cannot pay. So even though that was estimated, the rate of it is out of control. You were looking at foreign exchange between 8, and you are saying in 5 years' time, let it sit around 10, 10.5. It's now sitting at 11, and you're granted a 5-year loan, estimating that at that time 6 point something, 5 years, and you're now sitting at 11. So all those things and the ability of the market to adapt to these changes. So I'm not blaming, or I don't think the banks will necessarily blame anybody from MPL, but this is the background to it.
Were there different rules set for those who were government service providers when the escrow meets and you sat on escrow or and all the rest, and because George Wiafe is a service provider for the Ministry of Finance, let's even weigh all the scrutinies, the guarantees and all the rest, and give the loan to George Wiafe. And when the Ministry of Finance delay, because if you profile the non-performing loans, a chunk of these firms are firms that have rendered services for government, and they're waiting for the money to be paid. Contractors and all the rest, these are chunk. But if the same rules were applied for maybe Kobna Mensah coming from maybe Mante Mankivi with a good enterprise selling spare parts, maybe you will still not have found yourself in the challenge.
Look, it's even the one who is very good was I don't get the name, but the one who's selling spare parts, who looks a bit far removed.
Good books. Individuals.
You would have granted him a loan. But guess what? This contractor who's got tipper trucks running around has gone to buy parts, and it's not he's been buying parts. So Kojo Mante, who is in good standing, suddenly doesn't get payment from his contractor because the contractor hasn't paid. His balance sheet is very thin. So suddenly, could you mention that who's never defaulted is in trouble? So when this kind of thing, when you have that kind of major default by a large contributor to the GDP, the snowball effect is great. Don't underestimate it. And we're not, as I said, there were no separate rules for whether they were government banks, there are credit
government contractor, i.e. a normal individual contractor.
Credit
the rules were banned for the person who was working for government, thinking that government can never default. While the real business actors in the economy were not given the support they needed?
No, look, sometimes, in fact, it's easier, I mean, from where I sat, it was easier for the real business actors to get credit than people who rendered services, because that's what I'm saying. This was an exogenous factor. So some organization would have taken the view that the government would never default. No, we didn't take that view. I mean, at least when I was there, we didn't have that view. You know, so my risk grading for you selling food was probably my loan came to you quicker than anybody supplying services to government, because I had the view that, look, they probably were taking on too much, you know, because you can read the numbers. So yeah, you know, that selection criteria was not because you waived the rules for somebody who, because you're servicing government and you thought he would not pay. Certain banks and or certain risk assessments, you know, would have taken a view because of volume of business, because of other things that happens within that risk basket. I'll expose myself. I just would say, no, I don't want that happens in that risk basket. Deposits, for example. Government sector can also be a good source of deposits, which banks need. But the private sector is also a good source of deposits. But it costs a lot more to gather that than to go and get one government deposit of, say, 500 million. To get that from the private sector, you probably needed 2,000 customers and a lot of work to do to get 2,000 customers to give you 500 million. So some, you know, you have all these choices. You know, again, as I said, it's entirely the call of banks, you know, when they are dealing with bad debts.
How do you see a correction taking place soon, or it will take quite a while when it comes to this non-performing loans thing getting to minimal levels?
I think it's a military or where they say never waste a crisis. You know, with this situation, the crisis in terms of financial reforms, in terms of internal review of credit processes, I mean, any financial institution that fails to do that, you know, under the current Ghanaian and or local and international situations, would have wasted a significant crisis that presents us a unique opportunity to re-look at risk grading, really look at you know, all these interrelationships and how we estimate what good looks like. I mean, this is thrown up everything. Everything that we've known is broken. So do we have what it takes, the quiet space to recreate it? And we need it. If we don't, we can't roll back to business as usual in the past.
Because, and then I asked this question because of the impact on this, and we'll be getting deeper into that, on fresh credit extension. Because with these high NPLs, with any bank that is so exposed, I know that the boardroom, the shareholders, we hard on you as an MD as to whether you go on expansionary mode for your loan book or not. How would this challenge impact on fresh credit to businesses when, at the time when someone say that we need this credit so much, if we are indeed on that path to recovery?
You know, the thing about banking and is the balance sheet talks. The balance sheet is not just numbers. So if we look at it, where does MPL leave you in terms of liquidity? Because whatever you are expecting to come, at the end of the day, what sits out there as MPLs largely are customer deposits. But those customers did not tell you to create MPL, so they will continue to expect to draw on their deposits and have life going. So you need now to conserve, whether it's fresh cash or whatever you had, to be able to get customer demands in terms of the use of their resources happening. So naturally, without anybody telling you, you've got to conserve liquidity. So if you're conserving liquidity, how to create fresh risk assets? So those are the points to consider. Even distributing profits or whatever to your shareholders. Look, I have the stacked assets. I've not recovered them. They were customer deposits that I used to create it. So even if I make new profits right now, there's no way I can distribute those profits. I have to pile it up to make sure that what sits there out there in MPLs is not covered by the bank's own funds. And the bank's own funds will be the capital that the owner started with, plus all the profits that have been retained within the organization. So again, the institution's ability to just do new things. You do new things with more deposits, you do new things with your own income, profits, all of that is being retained to preserve the organization. So you ask for fresh credit creation, no, it's going to be extremely difficult.
To a layman, it means that lending will be seriously affected.
It should be
going forward.
It will be. It will be not because people desire it, but first of all, preserve the organization, preserve the bank, preserve the sanctity of that. You can't be reckless around it.
So then some will say that why should a George Wiafe, who has been good with his books, good with his business, suffer for an escrow committee or an external environment not favoring a banker? Because what has happened for a lot of good businesses out there will suffer in getting loans from the banks.
Look here, sometimes when you talk in these generalities, you talk general. But if the George Wiafe is a AAA business and needs credit, and I know that the external environment, no matter how severe, he's insulated, his internal processes are solid, I'll go wherever I can to get the money and give to George Wiafe. So it's not necessarily when you say credit is slowed down, that it just grinds to zero. No. The George Wiafes with AAA rating, good sort of mitigants against external pressures, good internal systems that their clients are not suffering because they don't have money to buy their goods and services. Yeah, those ones, AAA, we will find the money. The banks will find money to keep you going.
The banks,
so the credit doesn't grind to zero.
Yeah, but the good ones are still going to get the credit.
The good ones will still.
Domestic direction program. Yeah. Some have said that, listen, the banks were so much exposed to government papers. Yeah. And then we had a bank in this country in the past who was just doing government treasury bills and government papers and was deemed to be profitable. Yeah. Some have said that maybe the banks will cry. You took a bigger share or the hit of this whole program. But some will also say that if you were more prudent with respect to how you spread your investments and all the rest, maybe the impact could have been lesser than what happened. Yeah,
that's a very fair comment. And the point I made earlier, that decision was entirely the internal considerations of that bank, and it's different. I mean, for example, my view was always that it's more difficult to create a private sector risk asset. Take time and create it. When it is there and is doing well, you have annuity into the future. But that cost and that uncertainty is too much for some, so you just put the money into government paper. But that can disappear. Either interest rates will just plummet, or you have a default as we have now. So it's a risk choice that these banks took. And they suffer the consequences for the risk choices they made.
Do you think that commercial banks have learned their lessons? That is one. And do you think that things has to change going forward? Because some are saying that if you want a sector that is more rigid than ever before, that's the banking sector. And how the straitjacket rules and what the tick box before you should lend and all those things. Some are saying that despite this challenge, fast forward 5 years, 10 years, you will still have a lot of the commercial banks that are still so exposed heavy in government papers.
No, I mean, as I said, you ignore a crisis, you have to exploit the crisis. And I believe that there will be a significant shift in the way credits and risk assets are created going forward. You wouldn't rush headlong into these things. Our belief on the default capability or what loss given default rates of various asset classes, including government, will change. And again, in terms of rigidity, I don't support the fact that banks are rigid. In fact, if you look at technology, the use of technology, AI and all of that, the banks are probably at the cutting edge of using technology to try to understand who our clients are, what the future looks like, and mitigate. And, sometimes extraordinary events just happen around the world, or it's even still currently happening around the world. So in terms of rigidity, no, it may still look the same because a loan to a client is a loan to a client. But if you look at it 20 years ago, the quality of work that went into doing that loan, it's not as good as the quality of work now to create the same loan, because the tools available to the people in the industry are just very rich.
So something I get from you that when it comes to placements on funds, investment and all the rest, government papers and all the rest, things are going to change going forward. It will never be the same. Looking at what has happened with this
program. Never waste a crisis. Go back, relook at your aggregate risk assets, reassess them, our whole, and the good thing about this kind of what has happened in Ghana, It's happened before. Well, I think Argentina, the Latin America, we've seen these significant, government defaults. And it changed the way banking was done. Ghana and other places now happening, and not just Ghana, some serious issues happening in Europe and other places will change the whole way, and we kind of cross-fertilize each other. The Ghanaian market just doesn't sit alone. We have a larger African context. Zambia is going through our problem, Ghana, and even some of the bigger countries going through the severe changes, and how it's impacting their financial system. All that throws up new models, and then you see the banks moving towards those new models.
And then they are the skeptics.
Yeah.
Who are looking at what is happening to treasury bills right now.
Yeah.
And again, they ask themselves, they never again, they are not convinced, because there's also a demand as well.
Yeah.
The fact that government is willing or has the appetite to borrow, there's also the willingness of these banks to fully participate in these treasury bills. And look at the rate. And somehow, despite the assurances the government has given, will not restructure and all the rest, short-term lending running in 30s. Let's look at even overnight lending among the commercial banks. Some are worried, Mr. Ndani. We are not convinced by the assurances from the regulators and even government that, listen, it is a time bomb.
Look, I mean, as I said, there are certain critical events that it depends upon what that envelope of revenue coming to government will be used to do. If we run our governments before we receive. Governments run before they receive revenue. Yeah. So you are employed, and the guy paying taxes will pay a month or a quarter ahead. So that short-term need for government to borrow to keep essential services, which is your T-bill or the very short end, is a very essential part of their own cash flow management system. So to the extent that they will drop everything else and use their revenue to manage the here and now, it doesn't necessarily threaten your short-term borrowing whilst they rearrange themselves for the long term. I don't know whether I make myself clear. If you were earning 100 CDs and that was government revenue, and you thought, okay, salaries was 40, and so I could use 60 to do some long-term stuff. Now you say, no, you know what? This long-term stuff, I just have to pack it up. So the 100 now you have, you want to use it for the short end. There'll be enough money to cover what you're borrowing plus the interest, whilst you try and unwind the what you have put yourself for in the future. So yes, it's the interest rates are very high, the borrowing levels are high, but yeah, to the extent that we just benchmark it against a higher proportion of government recurrent revenue, which is what they collect, and it is not that bad, and they are not stretching themselves with that revenue a lot more into the future. The short end could be contained. My only worry is the long end, because the long run ones, you are building principal repayments, you are bringing higher interest repayments. Where is that cash flow generating capacity being created now to release money to pay what you have kicked into the future, plus the borrowings of that day? Because whether in 2025 there will be new things happening, 2026 there will be new things happening, which you have to borrow and pay for. Then you have kicked today's balls into that period. So you probably should be projecting a much higher revenue envelope. Where are those activities now that can tell us that there's any hope that those revenue projections will materialize? Who is going to produce that revenue?
So then I'll come back to you and find out from the businessman as well in all these things. What should he be doing? What would she, or what would the businessman, or what should the businessman be doing in all these current challenges? This is PM Express Business Edition. Let's look at the current economic crisis and how that is affecting, or how that could change banking in Ghana. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition, as we talk about the current economic crisis and how that could impact on banking going forward when it comes to lending, financing, and for those businesses out there, what should be the strategy going forward? He is an economist, and he's also the chief of Pshigu in the northern part of Ghana. Am I right? Thank you so much, sir. Now, I still want to wrap up the banking issues as well, and the bit about the never again. What about financing as well? And if credit is going to be affected, obviously financing will be affected. I know there are still some businesses that are coming in, and that even falls in your area as well, where those critical sectors, what should be the stance of these banks in supporting some of these areas?
Look, I think, as I said, never waste a crisis. This is also the opportunity for companies to stand up and raise credit on their own.
In these times?
Yeah, why not? Look, in these times, if, for example, MTN were to give you a paper equivalent to the price of T-bill, or 2 percentage points lower than T-bill, which one would you put your money
I'll do
into?
MTN.
So what's it so difficult?
Commercial papers.
Yeah, why should? So, the whole traditional view that any kind of financing must come from the bank is wrong. Our financial sector is not deep. In where you have very deep financial sector, credit paper put out there by companies on their own steam. They have the right governance structures in. They have solid financials that are verifiable by any number of financial analysts who can look at those papers. They can actually get out there, and people will make a reasoned judgment call on them. Give them short-term, medium-term, long-term financing. They don't need the banks. They don't. So I think, again, financial actors must begin to start to think about what kind of instrument. The Ghana Stock Exchange, so if I were some of these big companies, I wouldn't go in. If I were an MTN or let's say Guinness or breweries who have decent cash flow still coming through, I wouldn't go and borrow at 35%. I will clean up myself and say, look, I now look prettier than some of these institutions that you thought were pretty. And people will give them money and be more rest assured. And guess what? You actually use the banks as your backstop. Your normal run-mill cash flows will support those instruments. So this is something. Never waste a crisis. This is an opportunity for companies and also financial actors to look at other risk assets that can be created that are not dependent. So depositors will bring their money straight there. And buy commercial paper, buy short-term bonds, long-term bonds, put into equity for company they can trust. And the regulatory environment is solid enough to help them make those judgment calls.
In the era of expansion, and again, I still want to focus on the banking sector before I get to the business piece. In the era of expansion, the people, the personnel is needed. Recent reports by Bank of Ghana have raised issues about how some personnel within this space, and not just commercial banks, the whole financial sector have contributed to, let's say, fraud, pilfering, and all the rest. How do we deal with this challenge where I know the screening that people go to before you employ them when you're in the bank, but still there's a challenge out there. How do we deal with the people factor, because they are needed to fuel this recovery in the banking space, and how banking will change going forward because of what has happened?
I spent my entire working life, 35 years in banking, and this kind of comments is a very sad reflection, and I take it personal, and I say that there are institutional structures within the banks to deal with this kind of canker severely. And really? For most, there are institutions, and also we do have schemes or channels that clients who suffer this can feed back to the bank on an independent channel, it to be taken and dealt with. I have had to dismiss, in my life and my job, people who've fallen short of that. Some have even gone on to prosecution, depending upon the severity of it and what the law enforcement agencies thought about it. So, again, it's most of these institutions, banks inflicting this kind of bad name on themselves, and I'll say ourselves, because I still remain an old banker, and probably we taught people old tricks. I don't think so. So it's about enforcing discipline and making sure your internal disciplinary processes work. Make sure that your feedback from your clients. And Ghanaians, we don't speak back. We don't speak up. When you have suffered this, don't complain at your pub, at your feedback to the bank. We have lines that you can contact. You will not be identified, and there's a law. You can never really disclose a whistleblower. Those are the kind of things that we need. It's a sad reflection, but look, I'm not going to say it's a widespread thing. With those miscreants, it's usually a very tiny percentage. But we have a saying in my local language that one bad granite spoils the entire bunch that you've put into your mouth. You have to spit everything out. So help us to take
Mr. Ndani, is it fair to put this challenge on salary compensation?
No,
because
I disagree completely. I disagree completely.
He will not fall traps to some of these things.
I disagree completely that if you look at especially the financial sector workers are paid, absolutely more than the average worker in Ghana. Of course, you have your mining sector, the oil and gas areas, but if we take the rank and file of Ghanaian workers, the people in the financial sector will sit in the top.
So why are they doing 3%? Where is the motivation?
It's unbridled.
Themselves into deals that expose. Recently, there was the one that exposed a big bank. A young guy got into so much deals. So if it's not benefit, if it's not salary, where lies the motivation?
It's just unbridled ambition and greed. It's ambition, greed, and sometimes maybe when people look at people like us, they forget your age and they think that, it happened. No, it took 40 years plus. So it's just unbridled greed, ambition that's not properly managed. And it's not salary. It's absolutely not salary.
For businesses out there that need credit so much, it's more of a life support. You can structure or look at a business module or a company that has survived over the last 20 years. And it's all about depending on credit from banks to expand, pay salaries and all the rest. In times like this where some banks would definitely want to scale back and be more extra prudent with lending and all the rest. What should that business person out there, that firm out there
that is the kind of question we have to be dealing with. And that's where the bank should engage the central bank, because there are some of the clients, they are manufacturers. He's got equipment out there, he's got workers, he's got a market to serve. He's not defaulted, never defaulted, but your liquidity situation does not allow you to continue to run the lines of credit that you were providing to this client. You are literally going to force this client into bankruptcy. So there has to be some action between the Ghana Association of Bankers and the Bank of Ghana to see what kind of processes, what kind of liquidity packets can be built to support clients like that. Because what you've just described should not be allowed to happen.
But also some have said that for the business person, there has to be some internal rejigging. Because it also cannot be business as usual, thinking that it is the banks that are not helping me to even stay alive. Things have to change. It takes, when people are working with bank credit, it takes some cure period to wean yourself out. So it's not that their bank lines allows them to live lavish lives. No, the bank lines allow them to keep a certain level of stock, whether it's raw material to keep production going on a regular basis, whether it's finished goods to keep it supplied into the market, whether, and also credit to their own. So see how they lay off the money. They lay off the money, first of all, in bringing in raw materials. That's level one. Level two, there's still work in progress that is going on. It's not yet packaged for sale. Then level three is they package it for sale. It's in a warehouse for somebody to come and pick it up. Then level four, that somebody has picked it up and said, please, George, can you give me 30 days to pay? All that is cash that has been locked up in that business. And that is supported by the owner's cash plus bank lines. So it's not a lifestyle support. Banks will never give good companies lifestyle support facilities. So if something happens and
the bank is limited by liquidity and tries to pull this in, there has to be a rescue mechanism. Otherwise you are forcing a would-be good client into bankruptcy.
Fintechs, and you talked about tech and all the rest, and some would say that, do you think that it is going to change the way of banking going forward? And with respect to what has happened as well, new areas, I recently read the Bank of Ghana report that talked about the fact that, some banks are now even accepting more like treasury bills as guarantee and all the rest and all those things. In terms of financial technology and all the rest going forward, how is that also going to impact banking and how a bank deals with me and all the rest?
I told you that. That's why I reacted to say banks are rigid is not correct, because the banks are regularly in touch with fintechs and AI now to be able to predict their client. But by the time you come, George, and if you had an account and we looked at the account was in 6 months, it was a good account. By the time you come, the kind of data that we would have gleaned around would shock you. So it would be much easier to deal with you in terms of your financial solutions. So banking will change, even if we didn't have this crisis. The trajectory of technology and AI was already carrying banking, and banking was actually in step with that. So I just think that this global local crisis, it's a point of inflection, and institutions or financial services that will survive need to take that into serious consideration.
We've seen the CD, whether it's artificial or whether it has some stability as well. For you, what are the medium-term measures that we should be taking? At least we can assure ourselves of stability. Of appreciation, maybe some would say that we should go and sleep, but what do we need to do now, coupled on the back of a fund program, confidence building up and all the rest, that we need to do, both on the regulatory side, the governments, and even some would say even the commercial banks as well, discouraging FX, daily transactions, even locally, to build up and stabilize things for us?
My view on foreign exchange has always been in the real sector. What's been our envelope as a country in the generation of foreign exchange from ourselves? What's been the total, whether we are selling gold, whether we are selling cocoa, manganese, bauxite, services? What's been the growth rate for the last 10 years in how much we ourselves generate? Then what has been the growth rate in our own consumption of goods and services that we do not produce? And that's partly the reason why we are in where we are, because some of your bond programs came in to help us to continue to consume foreign currency or foreign goods and services that we didn't produce, and use debt to pay, with no commensurate increase in the foreign exchange generation on that side. So you cannot solve foreign exchange with policy alone. In fact, only policy to the extent that it enhances your generation of foreign exchange on a quantum basis. It minimizes your consumption of it. So for most of the things that we consume and everything around this office, they're all imported. If we can just reduce that and produce a lot more locally what we consume and use, and stop that, and only use foreign exchange for what is extremely essential that we cannot produce, we don't have the technology, we don't have that, then that's where you use policy to manage foreign exchange. But to double around, there's just no amount of interventions from the central bank that can help the situation. No, they are only tactical.
Policy-wise.
To see, when there are tightening in the market, you're just losing it a bit. But the structure, your foreign exchange generation structure must be solid and measurable and seen to be growing. Your foreign exchange consumption must be seen to be noticeably coming down. Your domestic production and use of your own domestic goods and services must be going up at quantum levels. That's the solution.
What about the behavioral bit as well? I mean, I'll compare South Africa to us and how they've been very tough on FX. Local currency, local FX, it's become a daily transaction for a lot of individuals.
Policy.
We also have to do, and some say there is a commercial banking intervention element there where you discourage FX transactions locally.
Policy, enforcement. And we have all those, it's enforcement. I agree with you that if you don't have it, you are enforced to ensure that people don't have it to use on frivolous things. But if you don't, people will buy anything.
Mr. Ndani, how do we finance the recovery? There are some who complain bitterly about companies going through challenges, and they have been hit with several taxes as well. There's an argument that how should the recovery be funded? Should we still go on heavily on borrowing to finance the recovery, or the citizens, the businesses should finance this recovery? And how should it be done? Because there's an argument that businesses are down, they're going through challenges, and still GRA is on their doorsteps, trying to let them honor their tax obligations. How do we deal with this challenge?
So you have to say who's going to lead the recovery? Government leading the recovery or private sector leading the recovery? Government can never really lead the recovery. Private sector must lead the recovery. That's why government needs to pull back all the non-essential expenditure. If you pull back and take that off, then there's a small window to relieve the cost of doing business on the private sector and allow them to lead that recovery. Because at the end of the day, if we had 500,000 productive companies that are generating over 100 million a year, do the maths and find your corporate revenue. So and it's always often the case in our part of the world that we think government must lead the recovery. No, governments are mainly spending units. Yeah, they have some few things they do, but if they can just pull back, for me, leading the recovery is government pulling back on all their non-essential expenditure. That saving, they should use that to relieve the cost of doing business on private sector and put in the controls to ensure that the private sector grows at a significant rate, and then, of course, kick in taxes and manage efficiently. It has to be a private sector-led growth. It has to be an enabling investment environment that will actually bring in, foreign direct investment into private business, which will generate that revenue, on which government can now rely on taxes, and then use the tax to pay their debts. And then, if there's any surplus and they want to do a few more luxury projects, let them do that. But we can't expect government to still borrow and come and do all the big roads, all the big schools, all the big hospitals. No.
Isn't it the chicken and egg situation, some will say? Because which one comes first? Because the argument that at the moment, there's a challenge. Because I try to, because when I also engage a lot of businesses, they complain that we are still trying to stabilize our situation, but there isn't even any relief coming from GRA or even a space to reorganize ourselves when it comes to meeting our tax obligations.
I think GRA sometimes probably get hammered for the wrong reasons. They have, government and parliament passes all this raft of taxes and charges an organization called GRA to implement it. Is that where we should be complaining? We should be complaining. We have a saying that when you trip and fall, you don't look where you fell, you look where you tripped. So all these pack of taxes that we are complaining about GRA, what's Parliament doing? What's government policy? It's all these taxes that GRA is charged to collect, and government is waiting for it to come. What are they using it for? That's what I'm saying. If we can just review what they are using it for and cut out what is not necessary, then they could save that. And when they are saving that, then they can now release the pressure on taxes. Then the government, the private sector can feel, oh, okay, my tax has dropped from my aggregate 30% or 35% to now 19, 20%. Look at that saving. It's huge. So that can now be plowed back for reinvestment, for expansion, and finding new areas to do productive work.
And for those businesses out there who are so worried and they don't know what to do, what do you want to tell these businesses out there in terms of the outlook and what they need to do to ensure that they still stay alive?
I think keep the essentials going. Keep the essentials going. It's not going to stay like this forever. It will turn around. Yes, of course, nobody will be building new stuff. So just keep the essentials going. Those processes, new ways of work, which you can deploy to reduce your internal costs, do that. We just have to, and I would say for those that don't have any kind of reputation, test yourself out there in the market to see whether, you know, investors, the market will accept you, and investors would lend direct to you rather than, you know, you going to the banks all the time.
So then, are you optimistic about the outlook? You talked about, we've seen this before, and we read these things in the textbooks, the 80s and all, the PAMSCAD and all, the economic recovery program, 1, program 2, and all the rest. Are you optimistic about the outlook?
I'm an eternal optimist that the human brain, human activity, we're just adaptable. We're just adaptable. I think at the moment, even if we had complete national unity on what is our problem, we could adapt and change our behavior very quickly. Unfortunately, economics, adaptability, everything has now been subsumed into politics. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe things will correct.
And thank you so much, Mr. Danny, for it. I really appreciate it so much. And I know the debates will still go on out there in terms of how to turn things around and stabilize the sector. And even for the commercial banks themselves, what they need to do to ensure that things stabilize going forward. Yes. He is a former chief executive of a commercial bank and also a former president of the Ghana Association of Banks, chief of Fishugu, and also I call him the economist those don't know. My name is George Wiafe. Have a great day. This has been PM Express.